Good day, everyone. This is Jerry from Rhapsody Tours. Today we're going to take a look at some of the positive effects that took place after the Titanic disaster. First, there were the lifeboats. Back before the launch of Titanic, Alexander Carlis, Hartland & Wolff's general manager and chairman of the managing directors, suggested Titanic use a new, larger type of lifeboat crane that would give the ship the potential to carry 48 lifeboats. This would have provided enough seats for everybody on board. The White Star Line decreed that only 20 lifeboats would be carried, which would hold only 52% of the people on board. This was based on the British Board of Trade regulations stating that British vessels over 10,000 tons must carry 16 lifeboats with a capacity of 5,500 cubic feet, plus enough capacity in rafts and floats for 75 or 50% in cases where the vessel had watertight bulkheads. Therefore, the White Star Line actually provided more lifeboat accommodation than was legally required. This regulation had not changed since 1894 and made no extra provision for larger ships because of the expected difficulty in getting away a greater number than 16 lifeboats in any emergency. After the Titanic disaster, recommendations were made by both the British and American boards of inquiry stating, in part, that ships would carry enough lifeboats for all those on board. Mandatory lifeboat drills would be implemented and lifeboat inspections would be conducted. Many of these recommendations were incorporated into the International Convention for Safety of Life at Sea passed in 1914. Now that was 98 years ago, and with the size of these new cruise ships being launched, maybe new ways to get people off a ship in an emergency should be visited. As it stands today, if you have a cruise ship with, let's say 4,000 or more passengers and crew, it would take time for everybody to muster to their appropriate lifeboat station, if they remembered the drill, and then to get onto the lifeboats. With everything working smoothly, this could still take 45 minutes to an hour. 24-hour radio watch. For us today, this seems like a no-brainer. Back before 1912, this was fairly new technology. Following the inquiries, the United States government passed the Radio Act of 1912. This act, along with the International Convention for Safety of Life at Sea, stated that radio communication on passenger ships would be operated 24 hours a day, along with a secondary power supply, so as not to miss any distress calls. Also, the Radio Act of 1912 required that ships maintain contact with vessels in their vicinity as well as coastal onshore radio stations. It was agreed in the International Convention of Safety of Life at Sea that the firing of red rockets from a ship must be interpreted as a distress signal. This decision was based on the fact that the rockets launched from the Titanic prior were interpreted with a bit of ambiguity by the freighter SS California. Officers on the California had seen rockets fired from an unknown liner from their decks, yet surmised that they could possibly be company or identification signals used to signal other ships. At the time of the sinking, aside from the distress situations, it was commonplace for ships without wireless radio to use a combination of rockets or Roman candles to identify themselves to other liners. Once the Radio Act of 1912 was passed, it was agreed that rockets at sea would be interpreted as distress signals only, thus removing any possible misinterpretation from other ships. As of today, radio operations have changed dramatically. There is the Marine VHF, the first radio on every boat. It is designed for short-range communications of 25 miles or so. There is the Marine single-band radio. It has a range, depending on frequency, that extends to 3,000 miles and beyond. And then there's the satellite telephone, or satellite phone, or sat phone. This is a type of mobile phone that connects to orbiting satellites instead of terrestrial cell sites. Depending on the architecture of the particular system, coverage may include the entire Earth, or only specific regions. After the Titanic disaster, the U.S. Navy assigned 2 ships to patrol the Grand Banks for the remainder of 1912. In 1913, the United States Navy could not spare any more ships for this purpose, so the Revenue Cutter Service, the forerunner to the U.S. Coast Guard, assumed responsibility. In January 1914, A treaty was signed at the International Convention for Safety of Life at Sea that resulted in the formation and the international funding of the International Ice Patrol. The United States Coast Guard to this day monitors and reports on the location of North Atlantic Ocean icebergs that could pose a threat to transatlantic sea traffic. Since the mid-1940s, Ice Patrol aircraft have become the primary ice reconnaissance method, with surface patrols being phased out except during unusually heavy ice years or extended periods of reduced visibility. The aircraft have a distinct advantage for ice reconnaissance, providing much greater coverage in a shorter period of time. This is just as important today in light of the speed of our climate changes. With the oceans warming, we are finding more icebergs in the North Atlantic. Approximately 40,000 medium to large-sized icebergs have calved or broken off annually in Greenland, and about 1 to 2%, that's 400 to 800 of those, make it as far south as 48 degrees north latitude. If you look at a map of the Atlantic Ocean, that is between St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, and Paris, France. They can range in size from massive tubular and blocky bergs in excess of several million tons to small bergs weighing 1% of this. The average iceberg weight for the Grand Banks area is 1 to 200,000 tons, and that is about the size of a cubic 15-story building. Almost immediately following the disaster, ships were refitted for increased safety. For example, the double bottoms of many existing ships, including the RMS Olympic, were extended up the sides of their hulls to above the water lines to give them double hulls. Another refit that many ships underwent were changes to the height of the bulkheads. The bulkheads on the Titanic extended 10 feet, or around 3 meters above the waterline. After the Titanic sank, the bulkheads on many other ships were extended higher to make the compartments fully watertight. Today, modern shipbuilding makes considerable use of prefabricated sections. Entire multi-deck segments of a hull or superstructure will be built elsewhere in the shipyard, then transported to the building dock or slipway where they're fitted into place. So it appears to me that many great strides have been made to improve the safety on ships over the last century. But there is still one aspect of a ship's safety that cannot be overlooked, and that is the human element. As we are not able to control the mind of those in charge, there will always be possibilities of mistakes. Even on modern ships at sea, accidents can happen, as we have witnessed in Italian waters with the Costa Concordia disaster. Don't let this deter you though. I still feel very safe whenever I board a cruise ship for a tour. For another exciting tour option, if you would like information on Ireland, the birthplace of Titanic, visit us at www.rhapsodytours.net. That's RHAPSODY tours.net, or you can reach us on Facebook at Ireland, the birthplace of Titanic, or on Twitter at Rhapsody Tours. If you have any comments, we would love to see them. In our next video, we will look at Ireland, the birthplace of Titanic. Until then, have a wonderful day.